When it comes to that first session with a client, I think it's very important to have some sort of movement screen. The FMS is a great one. I think there's a few others that work really well, but the FMS is a really easy, simple one to get through. And personally, I'll use a modified one at this point where I usually won't do the bird dog or the push-up test. And sometimes I won't even use a split squat, just depending on the client. But the most important thing to understand about movement screens, I know the FMS claims to have all this crazy amount of knowledge just from doing the movement screen. A movement screen is literally just a starting point to give you some knowledge about this client, about how they move, about where potential problems may arise. And it'll just help give you kind of a little bit of an outline of what's going on with this person. This person might be hypermobile and they might be trying to rely on their joints to provide stability rather than using their muscles. They may be really tight and stiff and they need to loosen things up when more foam rolling, maybe some more stretching. So again, it's just a starting point just to give you an idea of where this person is at. It is not definitive by any means, and it's not something that they need to pass or fail. And if you want to explain what's going on behind the scenes to them, that's cool. Some people want to know some of the science behind it. Other people literally couldn't care less. They just kind of were like, okay, I'll just do this stuff. It doesn't matter. Also, part of the movement screen for me, the movement screen is just part of the whole entire first experience of that client, because I'm usually going to give people a pretty simple, straightforward workout just to literally use that as the assessment as well, because a movement screen can only tell you so much about this person, and you're only getting a little bit of data. And even a whole entire workout where you're assessing someone, it's only going to give you a little bit of data. But again, this is the whole point. You just want some data to see what's going on with this person, how strong they are, how weak they are, what's going on, potential injury or potential issues that may crop up, and that type of stuff. And of course, you want to ask the normal questions. You have any injuries, health issues, and that type of stuff. So the whole entire experience itself is the assessment. So don't look at like the FMS as the end all be all movement screen. It's not. It gives you good data, but there's other ways to assess people and use that data to let you know what's going on. So personally, my movement screen at this point is just an altered functional movement screen at FMS. I still use the overhead squat just because that gives you a lot of data to kind of see what's going on with a person. I will do just a toe touch. Can the person touch the toes? Can they touch their floor? Just to kind of see what's going on with their mobility standing up. I'll also typically do an active straight leg raise just to kind of, again, see what's exactly going on with their hip and hamstrings. I typically won't do the lunge, or I may just have them hold a lunge position. But if someone's really overweight, I'm usually not going to have them do that just because it's going to be extremely difficult for that person. I typically skip the hurdle step. I'll typically skip rotary stability because most people are going to I think you'd really have to try really hard to fail that, or be extremely old to fail that test. Shoulder mobility test is a really good one. Also for shoulder mobility, I also try to look at their shoulder blades to see how they're moving. Are their shoulder blades rotating up as their arms go up overhead or not? Typically, this is going to be an issue with a lot of guys or people who are active athletes because their shoulder blades would be so locked down. It could be proved to be a problem. Could be causing some shoulder pain. If I can get their shirt off, I will. If I can't, I won't. It's not a huge deal. You can kind of still see what's going on, and you can also place your hands literally on their shoulder blades to kind of feel if they're moving. And then trunk stability push-ups, usually not something I'll do because usually in the workout, the assessment workout I'm usually doing push-ups and or a plank with there. So I don't really need to see their trunk stability push-ups as well. So again, the whole point of a movement screen is just to give you some data to see what's going on. And the FMS does give you a lot of data. So if you want to use the FMS as is, totally fine. It is a really good system. They have a lot of really good studies about it. But again, it's not the end-all be-all. It's just literally one little slice into what's going on with this person. So one really important thing to note is you will come across clients who are very hypermobile. Typically, it'll be females. However, I have seen some males during my training career. But people like this are always complaining that they're very tight, that their muscles feel like really tight. However, they're stretching all sorts of crazy directions. They can easily palm the floor. They can really, they're just Gumby. They can bend in all sorts of weird directions. Yet, they're always complaining about being really tight, so they keep stretching. And what's going on here is that their joints are so mobile that it's basically locking down the muscles around it to create some stability, because that joint is craving stability. So it'll lock down the joints and it'll keep the muscles really tight, because otherwise a person would just kind of fall apart because they're so hypermobile. So something really to be aware of. Whenever I'm screening somebody, if they can touch both hands to the floor, it's immediately like a little bit of a alarm bell. Not really an alarm bell. It's not something to be really scared of, but just kind of like as soon as someone palms the floor, this is kind of the first thing I'm thinking to myself. I'm like, is this person hypermobile? And so you can kind of ask them some questions like, you constantly stretch, but you always feel tight. That's kind of a good question. You can also do what's called the Baton's hypermobility score. And this takes like 3 seconds to do, honestly. You just ask them, can they touch their thumb to their wrist, which I clearly cannot do? Can they bend their pinky more than 90 degrees, which again, I cannot do? Can they hyperextend their elbows? Let me make sure clearly I'm not hyperextending my elbow. Can they hyperextend their knees? And can they palm the floor? This is just a really quick screen just to see if someone's hypermobile or not. And you'll be able to tell real quickly who the hypermobile clients are, because again, they'll palm the floor, their knees will be super hyperextended, their elbows will be hyperextended, they'll easily touch their thumbs to their wrists. And even if someone's kind of like on the threshold of being like hypermobile, I would just still kind of treat them like that, because you want to treat them a little bit differently than normal clients. Because normal clients, you can stretch them, you can mobilize them, and that's good for them because their stiffness is coming from their muscles. Versus a hypermobile client, you don't want to stretch them because that stretching is just going to cause more problems. And they can stretch through ranges of motion that they have zero control over. So something really important for hypermobile clients is using their muscles and getting stronger. One thing to be really aware of and cognizant of when you're training a hypermobile client, again, don't allow them to try and get them to stop stretching, because it's, again, being counterproductive. It's like stretching something that's already loose in an effort to make it tighter. That's not going to happen. It's just going to make things worse, basically. But when they're working out, they'll tend to lock out their joints, and you'll see it all the time. They'll lock out their joints and they'll rely on the joint locking out to provide stability for them. Perfect example. Single leg deadlift. You'll see it immediately on single leg deadlifts people. Their knees are always crazy locked, and they're always doing the exercise with locked knees. And you can see it a lot on push-ups, where they do a push-up and then they're hypermobilizing their elbows to provide that stability at the top of the push-up. So make them aware of that. If you see that, make them really aware of that and force them to slow things down, force them to use their muscles. And over time, it'll typically get better. It won't always get better. Sometimes you're going to get people who have like pretty serious issues and they may need a referral to a physical therapist. But it is definitely something you can help with. And at the very least, if you just make them cognizant of what's going on with their body, it'll give them a lot more awareness and it'll help them focus on the muscles doing the work rather than using the joints to provide that stability.